The chandeliers of the Whitmore ballroom burned like 1,000 captured stars, their trembling light reflected in the polished marble and the jeweled eyes of London's finest. Laughter floated through the air, soft, brittle, and full of the cruelty peculiar to the well-bred. Amid this glittering congregation stood Lady Arabella Whitmore, the Viscount's daughter, whose beauty and defiance had made her both fascination and fodder for gossip. She wore a gown of ivory silk that shimmered faintly with each measured breath, and yet there was a loneliness about her carriage, a stillness that suggested her mind was far from the dance floor. She had long learned that admiration was rarely accompanied by respect. Across the ballroom, the Duke of Ravensshire had just returned from the wars, Alexander Hawthorne, a man whose presence drew notice not by boast or flourish, but by the quiet authority that clung to him. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the shadow of hardship still in his eyes, he bore himself with the air of one who had seen death and found London's gossip pitiful in comparison. The ladies fluttered and the gentlemen whispered of his fortune, his title, his scars. But when his gaze fell upon Arabella, something in the air seemed to change, subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet the orchestra's tempo seemed to falter, as if sensing a disruption in the elegant artifice of the evening. Arabella noticed him too, though she would not admit it. She had heard the stories, the heroic Duke, the darling of the Prince Regent, the man who had ridden through the smoke of Waterloo. Yet the memory of being courted and discarded by lesser men had hardened her against curiosity. She did not trust charm. She did not trust the easy gallantry of the aristocracy. Her eyes flicked toward him, calm and assessing, before she turned back to the dowager who was praising the floral arrangements. And then it began, the whisper, a cruel jest, born from envy, carried like perfume through the room. Someone had remarked, in a voice just loud enough to travel, that Lady Arabella had frightened away yet another suitor. The words spread, delicate and deadly, until laughter rippled across the crowd in soft waves. Her cheeks flushed, not from shame, but from anger, a slow, quiet fury that settled in her throat. She lifted her chin. Ravensshire heard it. He had seen men die for honor and men kill for less. And yet here he saw a woman enduring humiliation with a composure that would have broken most soldiers. Something compelled him forward. The crowd seemed to part as he approached, not out of deference, but curiosity. The orchestra shifted key, unsure whether to continue. He bowed before her, the perfect model of civility, and extended his hand. Lady Arabella, he said, his voice deep, low, and steady, would you honor me with a dance? For an instant, time hesitated. Every eye in the room was upon her. Her mother froze by the punch table, her fan mid-flutter. Arabella's lips curved, slightly, dangerously. No, your grace, she said clearly. I will not. The words fell like glass upon stone. The violins faltered, the dancers stumbled. Ravenshire's hand remained suspended between them, unflinching. May I ask why? He said, not with wounded pride, but genuine curiosity. Because I will not be anyone's charity performance, she replied, her voice carrying the perfect balance of poise and disdain. I won't let you touch me, not to silence their gossip, not to make a spectacle of my humiliation. Gasps rippled through the assembly. Some ladies blanched, others admired her nerve. The Duke's expression did not change. He bowed once more, lower than before, and said softly, Then I must beg your pardon, my lady, for wishing only to spare you what no person deserves. He turned and walked away with the unhurried grace of a man beyond embarrassment. The orchestra struck up again, uncertainly, as if pretending nothing had occurred. But the moment could not be undone. Arabella stood rooted, her heart hammering with the realization that she had not merely rejected a dance. She had defied one of the most powerful men in England before the entire ton. Her defiance had given her a fleeting victory, but the whispers that followed carried a sharper edge. As the night wore on, she felt their eyes upon her, the mothers whispering warnings to their daughters, the bachelors reassessing her worth. She smiled, laughed when expected, and endured. Yet beneath her practiced composure, a tremor of regret stirred. She did not regret refusing him. She regretted that he had looked at her not with vanity, but with something that resembled understanding. When the final waltz began, she found herself alone at the edge of the dance floor, watching couples spin beneath the chandeliers. Her parents had retreated early, embarrassed by the evening's spectacle. She stood by the window, gazing out into the rain-slicked street where carriages waited like beasts in the fog. Behind her, footsteps approached, the butler discreet and solemn. "My lady," he murmured, "His Grace has ordered his carriage to await your departure." Her breath caught. "I did not ask him to," she said quickly. "No, my lady, but he insists." Outside, the rain had begun in earnest, blurring the gaslights into halos of gold. Arabella allowed the butler to fetch her cloak, her mind warring between indignation and a curious sense of gratitude. She stepped into the cool night air, and the scent of wet cobblestone mingled with roses from the garden beyond. The Duke's carriage stood apart from the others, black lacquer gleaming beneath the lamplight, his crest glinting faintly. She hesitated, aware that to enter it was to accept his protection and perhaps invite further gossip. Yet she was also aware that he had offered it without demand, without even seeing her face again. Pride warred with reason. In the end, she allowed herself to be helped inside. The interior was dark, warm, and scented faintly of leather and sandalwood. The coachman said nothing as the carriage rolled forward, wheels hissing through puddles. Through the rain-streaked glass, Arabella saw the glow of the ballroom fade into the distance. She sat in silence, her gloved hands folded in her lap, wondering, not for the first time, why sincerity always arrived when she least wished for it. By the time she reached her family's townhouse, the rain had turned to mist. The carriage door opened, but the Duke was nowhere to be seen. Only the faint imprint of his crest on the letter left upon the seat remained, unsealed, its contents blank save for a single, deliberate fold, an unfinished gesture. She stared at it long, while before stepping into the house, the echo of her own words lingering in her mind. "I won't let you touch me." And yet, as the carriage wheels receded into the fog, she felt a chill realization take root. She already had been touched, though not by hand, but by something far more dangerous: curiosity. The morning light crept softly through the tall windows of the Whitmore townhouse, laying pale ribbons across the floor. Lady Arabella sat at her writing desk, her eyes unfocused, the blank letter from the Duke still folded in her drawer. She had tried to forget the events of that fateful ball, to dismiss the Duke of Ravenshire's gesture as another example of masculine arrogance. But the image of him standing beneath the chandeliers, composed and unashamed after a public refusal, haunted her more than she cared to admit. There had been something too deliberate in his restraint, too measured in his silence, as though he had seen in her defiance something familiar. 3 days passed before the next disturbance arrived, small, unassuming, yet heavy with consequence. At dawn, a footman appeared with a parcel wrapped in cream paper and tied with a silver ribbon. The seal bore no initials, no crest, only a faint trace of wax impressed by what looked like a signet worn smooth with time. Her maid, curious, lingered by the door, but Arabella dismissed her with a glance. Alone, she unwrapped the paper to find a small silver locket nestled upon dark velvet. When she opened it, expecting perhaps a miniature or a lock of hair, she found instead a folded scrap of parchment. It was not a love note, but a sketch, rough, hastily drawn, yet hauntingly beautiful. It depicted a woman's face, serene and strong, bearing an uncanny resemblance to her own. She stared at it, her pulse quickening. It was impossible that someone could have captured her likeness without sitting before her. The thought unsettled her. No name, no signature, no explanation accompanied it. She turned it over and found, written faintly on the back in a soldier's hand, the words, "Remember her." That was all. Her mother, upon discovering the locket, was horrified. "It is scandalous," she cried, pacing before the hearth. "An anonymous gift of such intimacy. It must be returned at once. The servants will talk, and if the Duke is behind this—" "If—" Arabella interrupted, her voice calm but sharp. You think it could be him? Her mother hesitated, then whispered, "No other man would dare." The thought disturbed and intrigued her in equal measure. The Duke's gesture at the ball had already painted her as the subject of gossip. Now this mysterious token, threatened to deepen her peril. Yet instead of fear, she felt a reluctant fascination. She placed the locket in her drawer beside the Duke's blank letter, as though pairing two fragments of a riddle. That afternoon, she attended a charity gathering at Lady Pembroke's estate, a garden affair of manicured civility where the city's most benevolent gossips convened under the pretense of good works. Arabella had not expected to see him there, yet as she stepped from her carriage, she caught sight of the Duke standing at the far end of the lawn, speaking to an elderly veteran with quiet earnestness. The sight disarmed her. There was no trace of the arrogance she had expected from a man of his rank, only gravity, the weariness of one accustomed to carrying silence like armor. Their eyes met across the expanse of roses and parasols. For a moment, neither looked away. Then, as if compelled by an invisible thread, she crossed the lawn toward him. "Your Grace," she said coolly when she reached him, "I seem to have received something belonging to you." He regarded her with that steady gaze which neither flattered nor pleaded. "I believe, my lady, that what belongs to you can never truly be misplaced." She drew a breath, keeping her composure. "Then you admit it?" "I admit," he said softly, "that I wished you to have it." "Why?" His expression did not waver. "Because it once belonged to a man who died, believing that likeness would be recognized. I only honored his wish." His words puzzled her, but she could not press him further without exposing too much of her own curiosity. Around them, conversations buzzed, and the scent of lilies mingled with fresh rain from the morning. She felt, absurdly, that the world had narrowed to the space between them. "Do you think silence makes a man noble, Your Grace?" she asked. Her tone was sharper than she intended. "No," he replied, and there was a flicker of sorrow in his voice. "It merely prevents him from saying what the world is not yet worthy to hear." Her chest tightened unexpectedly. The conversation ended as Lady Pembroke swept in to claim his attention, leaving Arabella standing amid the laughter of others who did not see the invisible war being fought within her. By evening, the city's whispering mouths had already turned the incident into entertainment. The morning broadsheet society column carried a single cruel line. "Ravenshire's new campaign is fought not on foreign soil, but in the heart of Mayfair." Her name followed. Her mother's eyes brimmed with panic. Her father spoke of reputation and damage. Invitations ceased. The Whitmore household fell under a cold, watchful silence, as though the walls themselves were listening. Arabella bore it outwardly with grace, but solitude gnawed at her. The Tun, which once admired her sharp tongue, now withdrew from her entirely. She began to walk alone in the gardens, her gloves damp with evening mist, the silver locket a secret weight against her skin. Each day she resolved to send it back, and each day she failed. Something about the Duke's restraint unsettled her pride. He had made no attempt to defend himself, no explanation offered to society. His silence, infuriatingly, seemed to protect her more than her own protestations could. It was late on the fourth night when a carriage stopped outside her door. The footman brought her an envelope sealed with the Duke's crest. The seal was faintly smudged, as though pressed in haste. Inside lay a single line written in his precise hand. "Meet me where silence cannot be overheard." She read it twice, then folded it carefully, her pulse unsteady. The firelight flickered across her face as she whispered the words aloud, feeling both dread and something dangerously close to anticipation. For the first time in years, she realized she did not know what she would do next. The rain began to fall again outside, soft and persistent, tapping against the window like a summons. She placed the letter beside the locket and extinguished the candle, but sleep would not come. Somewhere beyond the storm, a choice waited, one that could either redeem or ruin her. And despite every lesson pride had taught her, Arabella felt herself inching toward it. The night was soft with mist when Arabella slipped from the Whitmore townhouse, her cloak drawn close against the cool air. The streets were nearly deserted, save for the occasional rattle of a distant carriage and the echo of her own heartbeat. In her hand, she carried the Duke's letter. Its single line burned into her thoughts like a brand. Meet me where silence cannot be overheard. She had read it so many times that the ink seemed to live behind her eyelids. She did not know what she expected from him, only that curiosity had conquered her better judgment. The gardens behind the Whitmore estate lay shrouded in silver fog, the moonlight broken by the gentle sway of branches heavy with lilac. He was there, as she had known he would be. The Duke stood beneath an ancient elm, his figure half-shadowed, the faint glint of his signet ring catching what light the moon permitted. He looked not like the untouchable noble the world revered, but a man wearied by truths he could no longer carry alone. When he saw her approach, he inclined his head, not as a conqueror, but as one asking permission to speak. "You came," he said quietly, his voice threaded with relief and restraint. "I should not have," she replied, though her tone lacked conviction. "If anyone knew I met you here, they would misunderstand," he finished, "as they always do." She hesitated, torn between indignation and an ache she could not name. "Then why summon me, Your Grace? Surely you understand what risk you ask of me." He studied her face for a long moment. "Because you deserve the truth. You deserve more than rumor." Her breath caught. "The locket, was it yours?" He nodded. "Yes, but it was not meant as a token of courtship. It belonged to a soldier under my command, a boy, scarcely 19, from Kent. He was mortally wounded at Waterloo. In his final moments, he drew that face in the mud beside him. Yours, though he could not have known you. He said he had seen you once, years before, when you stopped your carriage to give a coin to a beggar. That act, he said, restored his belief that goodness still existed. He asked me to find the lady, if I ever could, and to give her that likeness as proof that even small kindness can outlive the man it saves." Arabella's lips parted, her mind spinning with the image, a dying boy, clinging to the memory of a stranger. She could not speak. The Duke's voice softened. "When I returned to England, I looked for that face. I found it at a ball in Mayfair, the night you turned from me as though I were the villain in your story. Perhaps I deserve that, but I wanted you to know the truth before the world turned it into scandal." She stared at him, the enormity of his words settling like frost upon her heart. "Why not tell me this before? Why let me think it's some careless intrigue?" He gave a faint, rueful smile. "Because explanations, in our world, are seldom believed. I feared that if I spoke, you would think me another man seeking to bind you with sentiment." Her anger faltered, replaced by a strange sorrow. "And yet here we are, alone, in the dark, where explanations matter least." He took a step closer, though not near enough to touch her. "I did not ask you here for absolution, Lady Arabella. I asked you because I'm tired of silence. I fought a war to protect the freedom of men, yet I returned to find that women of worth must still fight merely to speak without reproach. I cannot bear to see the same injustice wound you." Her throat tightened. The world she knew, of propriety, appearances, careful avoidance of truth, suddenly felt unbearably small. "You think me strong," she said quietly, "but strength is merely a mask one learns to wear when weakness would be devoured. And yet," he murmured, "you wear it with more grace than any crown I have seen." His words lingered, fragile as breath. Neither moved. The air between them pulsed with something unspeakable, neither passion nor propriety, but the charged stillness of two souls realizing they had ceased to be strangers. She wanted to turn away, to break the spell before it broke her, but he bowed his head, and the humility of that gesture held her fast. "You have every reason to mistrust me," he said, "but I will not claim what I have not earned. I would sooner wait a lifetime for your faith than win it by force or flattery." His restraint disarmed her more deeply than any declaration of love could have. For the first time, she saw the man behind the title. Not the Duke, not the hero, but Alexander, the soldier who still carried ghosts. "You ask nothing of me," she said softly, "and yet you ask everything." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps I am a fool, but I would rather be a fool in your eyes than a coward in my own. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and soft. The scent of rain thickened. Arabella looked down, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She had come prepared to defend her pride, to confront him with cold words and distance. Instead, she felt stripped of both armor and certainty. "I do not know what to do with your honesty," she confessed. "Keep it," he said. "In a world built on deception, truth is the only gift worth giving." The first drops of rain fell, gentle but insistent. He made no move to shelter her, nor to step closer, and that absence of presumption felt more intimate than any embrace. She gathered her skirts, intending to retreat, but paused when he added, almost to himself, "I have written to your father. I have renounced your dowry. Whatever happens next, let no one say I sought you for gain." Her head lifted sharply. "You did what?" "I freed you," he said simply. "From obligation, from suspicion, from me, if that is what you wish." The rain quickened, drumming softly against the leaves. Arabella stood motionless, her pulse unsteady, her certainty dissolving like mist. He had taken from her the very weapon she thought she held, his need for her fortune, and left her with only herself. She turned from him without reply, unable to trust her voice. As she stepped back toward the house, the wind caught her cloak, carrying the faint scent of lilac through the air. Behind her, the Duke remained beneath the elm, still as a statue, rain beating upon his shoulders. Arabella did not look back, but she felt his gaze follow her until the fog swallowed her whole. By the time she reached her door, one truth had crystallized in her heart. The man she had sworn to reject had undone her not with touch, but with restraint, and she no longer knew which wounded her more. London glowed beneath a velvet dusk, its carriages tracing ribbons of light along rain-slick streets as the city prepared for the final ball of the season. Arabella stood before her mirror, her maid fastening the last clasp of a gown unlike any she had worn before. White and silver, austere in its elegance, the color of surrender and resolve. The reflection that met her gaze was not the impetuous girl who had once declared she would never be touched, but a woman tempered by understanding, her pride reshaped into something quieter, stronger. The Duke's letter to her father had already made its rounds through the ton. It was whispered in drawing rooms and dissected in parlors. That a man of his wealth would renounce a dowry for a woman's sake defied all convention. Some called it madness, others chivalry. Arabella had called it both. Her mother fretted as the carriage approached Vauxhall Gardens, murmuring about the spectacle her daughter would invite merely by attending. "The world will be watching you," she warned. "They smell scandal like hounds." "Then let them watch," Arabella replied, her voice steady. "Let them learn what it means to be wrong." When she stepped into the ballroom, every head turned. The chandeliers blazed brighter than memory, and the air carried that familiar blend of perfume, gossip, and expectation. The crowd parted instinctively, forming a corridor of whispers. She could feel the weight of every gaze, some pitying, some admiring, most incredulous. But she no longer feared their judgment. At the far end of the room stood Alexander Hawthorne, the Duke of Ravensshire, dressed in dark formal attire that lent his tall frame an austere nobility. His expression was unreadable, though his eyes, when they found hers, revealed something dangerously close to hope. For a moment, neither moved. Then she crossed the room toward him, her steps slow, deliberate, and defiant. The musicians faltered, uncertain whether to continue. Conversation thinned to silence. When she stopped before him, the entire ballroom seemed to lean closer. She held the silver locket in her hand, its chain coiled like a question between them. "You once said silence hides what the world is not ready to hear," she said softly, though her words carried through the hall. "Then let them hear it now." The Duke bowed slightly, uncertain of her intent. "My lady," he murmured, "you risk much by standing here." "Then let me risk it," she replied. "You gave up what men value most for what society values least, a woman's name. I will not let that go unanswered." Before he could respond, she extended her hand. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was seismic. "Dance with me, your grace," she said, her voice calm yet tremulous. Gasps rippled through the assembly. The woman who had once humiliated him now offered him the one thing she had denied before: public acknowledgement, a bridge across pride. The Duke's hesitation lasted only a breath. He took her hand, his touch firm yet reverent, and led her to the center of the floor. The orchestra, sensing history, began a slow waltz. Their movements unfolded in perfect rhythm, his commands softened by grace, hers guided by trust rather than fear. Around them, the ton watched in rapt disbelief. The whispers that had once wounded her now fell silent, as if decorum itself dared not intrude. Each turn of the dance seemed to unspool the tension that had bound them, until only truth remained. "You should hate me," she whispered as they circled. "You should despise my arrogance. I could no more despise you than I could despise light for outshining the candle," he said quietly. "You were proud because the world gave you no gentler armor. I have worn the same." Her eyes glistened. "You freed me when I never asked for freedom." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps I sought my own release in yours." The music swelled, their steps slowing until they stood almost still, the room holding its breath. Arabella felt the faint tremor of his hand at her back, a man holding back more than words. She understood then that love, when earned, was not possession but recognition. When the final note faded, the applause came hesitantly, then built to a thunder that filled the chamber. The Duke bowed to her with quiet reverence. She curtsied deeply, not as a concession, but as an acknowledgement of equality. The moment broke the invisible chain that had bound her reputation. In that silence, afterward, something within her shifted irrevocably. Later, when the crowd dispersed and the night's chill crept through the garden lanterns, the Duke found her standing alone on the terrace, the moonlight silvering the folds of her gown. He approached, hesitant now that ceremony no longer shielded him. "I should thank you," he said, his tone half formal, half broken. "You have done tonight what I could not. Silence them with grace." "I did it for myself," she replied, though her voice softened. "But also for you. You fought for me when I did not think myself worth defending." He shook his head. "I did not fight for you, Arabella. I fought beside you, though you never knew it." From his coat, he drew a folded paper, yellowed, creased, and bearing her father's seal. "This is the letter I never meant you to see. Your father offered me your dowry in exchange for restoring your name. I refused. I told him that if you chose me, it would be for love, not transaction. He did not believe me. Few would." She unfolded it, her eyes tracing the stark declaration in his hand. "I decline all financial arrangements." Her worth is her own. Her throat tightened. "You have undone every defense I ever built," she whispered. He looked away, as though afraid of what hope might reveal. "Then forgive me." "Forgive you," she said. "You have given me something far rarer than apology. You have given me choice." They stood in silence, the garden awash in the hum of distant violins. Neither reached for the other. It was enough to stand in the aftermath of their defiance, the air between them fragile and alive. When at last he spoke, his voice was scarcely above the breeze. "May I call upon you tomorrow?" Arabella smiled faintly, her eyes luminous beneath the moon. "If you still wish to, after what the world says tonight." He inclined his head. "Let the world say what it must. I have heard enough silence to last a lifetime." She turned toward the ballroom's light, her steps measured, her heart impossibly light. The Duke remained on the terrace, watching as she disappeared into the golden glow. Somewhere inside, the orchestra began again, a new melody full of promise. And as the night deepened over London, the whispers that once bound them turned into legend, spoken in drawing rooms with disbelief and reluctant admiration. That a woman's refusal had once humbled a duke, and that love, when it finally came, had asked for nothing but courage. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.